What's up, guys? In this video I wanted to talk to you guys about how I improved my speaking without really having a lot of conversations with people. So I didn't really have a whole lot of time or the opportunities to practice speaking Esperanto that much, and so this is what I did to help get better at speaking. So obviously I'm not saying don't practice with people, don't have conversations. I'm just saying, you know, not having people is not an excuse for not practicing. So this is what I did. And it's pretty simple, and I think a lot of people can use this. So I am already in the habit of talking to myself. It's just, I don't know. I just started doing it, and it helps me think if I just say it instead of thinking it to myself. So basically all I did was I just transitioned from English into my target language. So you can do this with, it doesn't really matter what level you're at, if you've recently started learning a language or if you've been learning for a year or two. You can start this at pretty much any level. So, for example, like if I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, I'm tired, I don't want to get out of bed. I might say it to myself in English first, and then immediately after, I would try to say it in the target language. And I would do this, random times throughout the day, one or two sentences here or there. And so that helped me a lot to get better at speaking, and it helped me to formulate my own sentences. Lots of courses, well, most courses basically tell you, say this, translate this, what's the word for this or that, and you don't really get to say what you want to say. And so by doing this, by talking to myself and saying what I want to say, I get to learn sentences that are relevant to me, and I get to practice what I've learned without having somebody tell me, this is what you have to say. And so by doing this, I've also found a lot of new words that I didn't know before that I felt like I should have known. I didn't start doing I didn't start doing this until I was about like an intermediate speaker. And so when I started doing this, I found out that there were a lot of basic words that I should have known already that I don't know, I just for some reason hadn't been taught, and I never learned it. And so I try to say some basic sentence and I think, oh, I don't even know that word. So I'd look up the word, or if I didn't have the time to look it up right then, I have a list of words in my phone, and so I just put it in there, and then later when I had the time, I would go look it up. So I found a ton of new vocabulary that was relevant to me, that's going to be very useful to me by doing this. So that was one of the main things that I got out of this, is learning new vocabulary that nobody teaches, or maybe it's just unique to me. Maybe it's something that I need to know so that I can talk about my job or my hobbies or this or that. So I learned a lot of vocabulary. And also, flashcards are great, but they usually don't really teach grammar. And so if you're doing flashcards, that's fine for learning the vocabulary, but when it comes time to put them into a sentence, a lot of times that's very difficult. And so this is one of the ways that you get to practice your grammar. You do your flashcards to help you remember the words, but you really need to practice using them in sentences. So that's the way that you can practice the grammar. Like I mentioned earlier, you can do this at really any level. If you've only been studying for a couple months, say basic stuff. When you wake up in the morning, say good morning to yourself if you want to. Say it's a beautiful day. The sun is shining, the sky is blue. I'm hungry, I want to go eat breakfast. Say some basic stuff. And the more that you learn, the more that you're going to be able to practice. One of the best times to practice talking to yourself is when you're in the car, because there's really nothing else to do. I mean, you're driving, you can listen to music or not listen to music, and that's pretty much it. Like there's not really anything else that you can do. So that's free time that you can use to practice. And I used to do this a lot more than I do now, but my job is about 30 minutes away, so that's 30 minutes to my job, 30 minutes back, 5 days a week. So in a week, that's 5 hours of practice that I could potentially get. There's some people working on my house right now, so if you hear power tools, that's what's going on. But anyway, so that's 5 hours potentially that you could get every week of talking to yourself. Now, obviously, you're probably not going to do that for 5 hours. But if you did it for, 1 day a week or 2 or 3 days a week, that's a lot of extra time that you can get. And so when I would drive, a lot of times I would just talk about the things that I see. And so if you're at a very basic level, maybe you know the colors. You could say the colors of the car. You could say that car's blue, but this one's green. And the more that you learn, you can make more complicated sentences and say, like, that car is cooler than my car. So you use comparative sentences and things like that. Um, and you can, talk about abstract things. It doesn't have to be just what's in front of you, but, where are you going? What are you going to do when you get there? Are you thinking about stuff for tomorrow? Are you thinking about stuff that happened yesterday or happened earlier in the day? You know, because this is stuff that you're going to talk about when you have a conversation with somebody. When somebody asks you, what did you do today? You're going to say, well, I went to the store, I went to work, I went to school, I did this and that. And so by practicing this by yourself a lot, you kind of prepare yourself for having a conversation. It's like you've already had the conversation with yourself. So when you have a conversation with somebody else, it's a lot more natural, and you've already learned a lot of the vocabulary because you looked it up. Um, and the language just seems a lot more natural to you because you've used it more. You know, the majority of people spend, the, most people spend the majority of their time studying a language through reading and writing and listening, but not that much time speaking. And so that's when it gets hard, because reading and writing, you can take your time. You can sit there for 5 minutes and read something, but when you're speaking, you want to try to get it out quicker, and so it makes your brain work faster. So that's one of the great things about being able to speak quicker, is that means your brain can work faster. So you really do need to practice speaking, and also, of course, you need to practice your pronunciation and stuff. And one of the things I didn't really know um, was it was hard for me to speak and think at the same time. I'd be saying something and I'd be trying to think about, what I was going to say next. And it was like I just could not do both of them at the same time. So the only way that I got over this was by talking a lot more. And so now I think I do a lot better at it. I mean, I'm not like the best speaker in the world, but I've definitely improved a lot. And so if you watch the first video on this channel versus watching some of the more recent ones, you'll definitely see a huge improvement. And I mean, I see a bigger improvement because I know how many times I had to redo parts for the first couple videos because I kept messing it up or I kept forgetting something. Y'all didn't see that, but I definitely did. So now when I make a video, usually I just sit down and do it. Maybe have to do part of it again, but for the most part, I'm like 1,000 times better, and basically all I've done is just talk to myself. That's pretty much it. I have had some conversations with people. It's actually kind of funny because the first time I had a conversation with somebody, she told me I spoke like almost fluently already. So I was pretty surprised. Um, so maybe that won't happen for everybody, but not having a language partner isn't really an excuse for not practicing. Plus, like I mentioned, if you say, well, I don't have the time, do it in your car. You will be surprised how much time you can get by just talking to yourself in your car. So hopefully hopefully I remembered to say anything and I didn't forget. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully that's helpful to y'all. So see y'all later.